So welcome to our first Section Next workshop, part of the Section Next workshop. We have Dr. Amanda Harsy. She's an associate professor and the director of mathematics at Lewis University in Illinois. And her PhD was in geometric group theory, but recently she's been all kinds of work on using data and games in the classroom. She's worked with lots of undergraduates on research on all kinds of topics, on sports and analytics, on games, on using graphs to study DNA things. And of course, she does lots of work on mastery-based grading. So that's what she'll be talking about today. And for our Section Nexters, in our panel, she'll be one of our panelists. So if you have questions on any of the other things, or of course, continuing discussion on this, she'll be happy, I think, to answer any questions you have then. Cool. So I will leave it to Amanda.
Okay. Hi, welcome. I love blathering on about alternate assessments, especially like mastery grading. I put grading for growth because I know that there's like the language of mastery isn't necessarily like, I think we're trying to like come up with a better term, but it is what I kind of am used to using. So until there becomes a bigger consensus, I like grading for growth. I like keeping it broad and thinking about it just as alternate assessment. There's mastery grading is a big umbrella, kind of like IBL is a big umbrella. And so I'll be talking a little bit more what a lot of my Gold 14ers and I do, which we kind of call mastery-based testing. And I feel like it's a perfect gateway mastery grading drug. It's pretty, I feel like it's easy, and then it allows you to get a taste for it, and you can then branch out into like maybe specs grading or standards-based grading, or kind of like modify it however you want. So I'm going to just give kind of a general overview of that. I want to, as I mentioned before, thank my next friends who we've all like worked together to like make this kind of presentation. So I hopefully will get this in an hour or 45 minutes and give you guys time to ask questions. But usually when I do a workshop, I give you a chance to kind of like work on your classes, but this is more an informative workshop. So let's see. All right, are you able to see the next slide? Okay, perfect. So this is kind of my plan for our time. So I'm going to do an introduction of what is this type of grading scheme. We're going to talk about grading on this type of scale, and then I'll show you a lot of examples from classes. I'll also talk about how do we do reassessment, what are some options for that, tips for organizing problems in test banks, keeping track of grades, and then we're going to talk about the common challenges, because that's like what things get dicey and interesting. I also made a Padlet for you all. I think you have to like ask to get permission for it. I'm going to put it in the chat now in case someone needs to leave early. But I'll like accept everyone. There's a lot of different resources. I thought that would be easier than sharing a Google Drive folder like I have in the past, because I don't know about you, but when I get shared Google Drive folders, they become in this big, like, how do I find it? So I'm trying this to see if it's a better way. So anyways, a little bit about me. So I teach at a mid-sized regional teaching focused school. We have a high teaching load. I teach 4-4 usually. I've been using mastery-based testing for 8 years. And I started just with a bunch of fellow Nexters, and we all just tried it, and I've not gone back. I have done some SOTL, and I continue to do some SOTL research where I actually do compare mastery grading techniques and traditional or like more standard exam grade or exams. And so I have some research. I can talk more about that at the panel, or follow-up questions afterwards. So one of the questions is, what is mastery grading? So there's an introduction to a special edition of Primus about mastery grading, and they do a really good job of what I like. So I'm almost going to read it verbatim. So instead of kind of having students work on getting partial credit to kind of make up their grade, student work will be graded directly on whether or not the student meets a set of clear outcomes. And so the idea is to give the students some clear learning objectives ahead of time, and then we grade them on whether or not they are able to demonstrate full mastery or being able to demonstrate that they understand those objectives. Because we have this high bar though, you're usually given multiple attempts to achieve this mastery, which I really like because it allows you to like practice something if you're not good at. It's not like you take exam 1 and you're like, well, I guess I don't get slope. Hopefully that will never show up again. And overall, the grade is usually based on the number and the type of objectives which have been mastered. There's many different ways to do this, and we'll talk about some of the varieties of that as we go along. So why switch to mastery grading techniques or these alternate grading? Well, one of my big things is I wanted to encourage a growth mindset. And I feel like this really forces students to revisit concepts that they don't understand yet. And it lets them kind of learn on their own time, and it emphasizes practice. I feel like it changes the focus from like, how many points did I earn on this, to understanding the material. Test anxiety, I feel like with giving more assessments and more chances, it has decreased test anxiety, and my research so far has kind of shown that. I think it's flexible. Like if you have a student who's out for a week, it allows them to kind of make up work a little bit. I've noticed that. I think even though the grading usually is more, there's more grading, it's faster and more holistic. I don't know about you, but like I am really bad at looking at a problem and thinking, this student made this mistake. How many points should I take that off? Because it has nothing to do what I expected or the rubric that I've made. And this is a little easier for that, I think. So how do you normally grade when you're doing this type of scheme? Well, two of the most common ones are either a binary scale, like either you mastered it or you didn't, or what most people I've talked to do, they do a 3-tiered approach. They have something like mastered, progressing, and novice, where mastered is like where they actually have shown that they completely understand the concept. Progressing is kind of like they're on the right track, but they need to revisit it again. And then novices, they definitely are kind of like, definitely need to spend a lot more time working on this. So usually when you do this, I only give like kind of credit for mastered. The progressing is more feedback for the student to know that they're on the right track. And that's one of the big things that we struggle with when you're doing this scheme is it progressing or is it mastered? And one of my friend Austin Moore said once, ask yourself, would this student benefit from revisiting this topic again? And if the answer is yes, they're probably a progressing and not a master. And I feel like that's a really nice way to think about it. So usually I would have you this would be where you do like some grading of your own, and no one wants to do more grading. So we'll kind of talk a little bit more about, this is an example. I've never used it in my class because I've not used mastery grading in college algebra. I haven't taught college algebra since I started doing this. But I really like this problem because it gives you a nice example. And it also is a flawed problem. So to kind of help you realize like, oh, what I think might be a good question isn't actually a good question. So suppose my objective that I want the students to understand is this kind of finding equations of lines. And it's kind of broken up to like, I'm looking for, can they find the slope of a line? Can they apply the point slope form? And can I write a line in slope intercept form? So depending on how you set up your course, some people might actually have each of these 3 bullets as a concept that they want to be thinking. I usually keep it broader, so I would have one objective, but I'm looking for these things within that bigger objective. So let's look at this question. It says, find an equation on a line through these 2 points. Here's the solution. And when you look at the student solution C, they definitely have not really mastered this concept. I feel like if we were grading on a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down, I would put a thumbs down, like they're not there yet. So this would be an example of something that I would probably grade as a novice attempt. Like there's, they don't have the slope correct and they don't understand what the y-intercept is. Here's another one. So here's student solution B. So what has the student done incorrectly here? I said I wasn't gonna let you grade, but I am gonna ask for what's wrong here? Yeah, the slope is flipped. And there's also kind of a careless kind of distribution, right? So this is something that definitely they're have a better idea. They're trying to use the point slope form. But so I would usually say like, this is progressing. This isn't mastered yet. I definitely feel like they don't really, I feel like they really need to know what that slope definition is. Now, the third one, and you should be expecting, oh, this is probably going to be the mastered example. And I'm going to say, yes, I would grade this as a mastery, but one thing you will notice is it correcting? Is it 100% like the same as the actual solution? No. And for some people, they would be like, wait a second, how can you give that as a mastery? So, and it kind of depends on what you're looking for as a teacher, but like, let's look at what is the mistake that this student did. What did they do incorrectly?
Arithmetic kind of in the end.
Right. They didn't distribute the negative correctly, like the negative times the negative. So in my mind, if I'm looking for, can they put together like an equation of a slope? Can they apply the point slope form? Can they put something in slope intercept form? They did a careless algebra mistake. And some of you are like, but this is an algebra class, Amanda. And shouldn't they not be careless about those things? Well, I would say you would need to, that would be something that you would need to think about like on your own time. But in my mind, this objective was just finding equations of line. It's not like, can I distribute algebra correctly? But one thing I would also argue is this is kind of a flawed problem, because what did I ask? I just said, ask them to find the equation of the line. But what I'm looking for is like, hey, I would like to see them write the line in slope intercept form. So technically they have written the equation of the line correctly in line 1, right? And then it was just in how they were simplifying where the problems came. So there's several things to keep in mind when you're wanting to do this type of grading. And this is one of those things where like the first time I do this, I make this type of mistake all the time. And I go, oh crap. And we do this for standard exams too. How many of you have written an exam question and you're like, oh, I was looking for this and this question doesn't like let me do that. So this is one where like, if you really wanted them to write an equation in slope intercept form, you better write that in the equation. Otherwise you might have a student who's like, but I have written an equation of the line. Why didn't I master this? And in this case, I would say they've mastered it. Now, some of you are like, but wait a second, I really want them to be able to do that distribution. And that's part of what we're trying to train them in, precision of language, like attention to detail. And so one of the things that some people do when they do mastery grading is that they will have concepts or objectives that are like, you need to demonstrate attention to detail this many times throughout the semester on exams or questions. And that could be something where like, you have to demonstrate that so many times. I don't do that. That's beginning to get a little bit, that's getting into the depths of like more complexion into your like grading scheme. But I also think it would work really well in a class like this that's training you for that. Okay. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of what I mean by a 3-tiered grading scale. Now, what I usually do and what most people do when they're doing exams in this scheme is you take your whole semester and you or your whole like time that you're teaching and you break it into a certain number of concepts. I usually, and this is not this is not like you have to do it this way, but I usually, if I have a 3 credit hour course, I usually have about 16 concepts. If I have a 4 credit hour course, I have about 18. That's what it usually like roughly comes down. And what you do is you can mix in like in-class exams that are mastery, and I'll explain like how that's tiered in a moment, along with other retesting opportunities. And we'll talk more about like what are some options for reassessment. And I usually front load the concepts so that the last exam has not as many concepts because they won't have as many chances to master those things. I'll explain in a second. So for grading, if you have a certain number of concepts and people are mastering, they get points for, they kind of get credit for mastering certain concepts. So there's usually 2 standard ways to think about this. One is that a lot of people just remove a certain percentage for every unmastered concept. I do it the other way. This is what I do. I usually I figure out how many concepts I have, and I want about, if they master about half of them, I want them to get a C. Like I want that to be a C. And then I break up the number of concepts into percentages so that if you mastered any 8, you'll get about a C. And then I just kind of divide out the rest of the percentages from there. So an example that I have is on this, and I'll be sharing these slides so you don't have to like be worried about like writing a bunch of things. So let's take a look at an example breakdown of concepts. So this is an example Calc 1 class. And so this is an example with 16. I would usually have 18. Oh yeah, Becky, you have a question?
Just a quick question. Are there like what if they're like, you have these 18 concepts, but 5 or 6 of them are really essential for the next class? Like
I have a slide for that just
okay,
after this one.
Okay.
Perfect. Yes. So yes, that is my exact question after this. So yes, we'll be talking about that. So suppose like this is my breakdown. And so when you do mastery grading, exam 1 will have questions regarding these concepts, and students will attempt these problems. You'll grade them. If they've mastered them, they don't have to do them again. They've gotten credit for it. Exam 2 will have the new concepts, but they will also have the older concepts. And so students can decide which ones they want to attempt on exam 2. Now, they won't be the exact same problems that they had in question 1. There'll be a rehashed version of it that still is assessing the same concept. So in this way, if you notice, then exam 3 has a lot more questions. So the exam gets bigger and bigger, but the students get to pick and choose which ones they want to do. Now, that's why I like to kind of front load my first exams, because it gives them more opportunities to retest. And Becky's question of, wait a second, there are some things like if they don't know the chain rule in Calc 1, I don't think they should be going on to Calc 2. I totally agree. And so one way to kind of deal with this, and this is what I do in my Calc 2 class, is I use something called core concepts. And I feel like it's really good for when you have sequential, like I'm getting, like the purpose of this course is to get them ready for the next course. And you can kind of pick out kind of core concepts and make those worth more, or like require, you have to master these 7 core essential things in order to at least get a C for this class or for your exam grade or something like that. I used to be I can talk more in details about like some of the issues I had with implementing this. What I've done now is I basically just make the 7 core concepts in my Calc 2 class worth 10%. I weight them to 10%. So I want them to be like, it's a punishment if they haven't mastered one of those. They could technically still pass the class, with other things with that, but I want them to really be focused on these. Did that answer your question, Becky? Yeah. Okay. So here, I'm now going to do just a little bit of like examples, and most of this will be so that you can reference this again, like in the slide. So here is a spotlight examples. So someone uses 20 concepts in pre-calc, 15 to 18 for Calc 1, 2, and 3. They kind of equally distribute between 4 exams. For example, they use a Calc 3 where they equally distribute between 3 exams. My Calc 3 uses 4, like I have 4 credit hours and I use 4 exams. They use a final exam. So the final exam would have all the concepts from all 3 or 4 exams, but no new concepts. And this person likes to use something called a reassessment quiz on single concepts in times between these exams to allow them extra chances to reassess. And they do the removing of the percentages. So here's some kind of breakdowns of like, here's a Calc 2 example of like how they've broken it down into different tests. So note that this is an example where it's not necessarily like equal, like it's not equally distributed. Here's a Calc 3 with 3 exams. Here's another spotlight. This is actually my class, so I can give you more details on this. I teach linear algebra. It's a 3 credit hour course. So I have 16 concepts. It's not core concepts, it's equally weighted. I do 3 in-class exams and I do 3 retesting weeks. So I'll talk more about what a retesting week is in a moment. And I think, I'm trying to remember who told me that they had like an 18-day class. I feel like this is what I would use in that 18-day class. So as I mentioned before, I kind of used the like breakdown of mastering half the concepts as a C. So here's a breakdown of some of the concept lists for my my linear algebra class. All right, proof-based classes. So I can talk more. I do mastery grading and real analysis, but these 2 examples are not that. So in real analysis, I have 16 concepts, and I also do oral exams in that class because I'm just all about alternate assessments. And I feel like that allows me to ask really difficult problems where they have to demonstrate their understanding of proof writing. So if you look at this spotlight on abstract algebra, note that they have a proof portfolio that allows them to kind of do that. You can ask harder questions, and their mastery-based testing is kind of a mixture of proof techniques and content-focused things. Discrete math. What I like about this example is that they have decided that 3 of their concepts are based on other criteria. So like their proof portfolio, their classroom community, and attendance. So you can be creative about that and kind of make sure if there's something important that you want to like have be a full concept, then worth like a particular part of the grade, you can do that. So here's an example of some concepts with abstract algebra. You can see 4 tests. You can also do things with general education. So this is an example for stats. This is kind of similar. They do something, I just kind of wanted to focus why I kept this slide in here was they do retesting in office hours. So, and only in the second half of the semester after they've gotten a certain number of concepts like that they can reassess. So this is kind of a different way to think about it. And they have 3 exams with 15 concepts, I think. Maybe not quite 15, maybe 16. Okay, so I'm going to pause before I get into kind of some more nuts and bolts about grading. Like I'm going to talk about reassessment, how, when, and where, and suggestions for organizing problems and keeping track of grades, along with kind of the common challenges or the other thing that's coming up. Do I have any questions right now? Just wanted to pause for a moment.
Can I ask a question? How long is your term?
My term is 15 weeks.
Okay.
But I think if I was, so like I've been a student and I haven't done any J terms, or like we also have 8-week condensed courses. I've not taught them, but we have like those as well. I actually like the idea of having like mastery grading for condensed classes because I feel like it's a lot of information right away. And sometimes it just takes people a little bit of time. So I taught linear algebra, and my first time teaching, I just had a midterm and a final. And that the midterm people just struggled because they didn't know what span was. But by the final, they were all doing span like pros. And like, that's what I really want. Like who am I to say you need to know this at this time? They need to be somewhat timely, but like, that was something where I was like, okay, I'm changing this to using like alternate assessment because I feel like that's important for that. So I feel like, again, those condensed classes, this might actually work out nicely. It's a lot of work, but any condensed class is a lot of work. So, okay, let's talk about reassessment. So there's already some baked in reassessment already because you have old concepts on new exams, right? There are some other ways to give them extra chances. Is some people do 1 or 2 concept quizzes each week during exams. Sometimes people just make a full exam and they get to pick 2 from them. Sometimes they have the student tell them which concepts they want. That sounds very stressful for me, but it works for other people, especially for smaller classes. Some people say you can just retest during my office hours. And then I like to use something called retesting weeks. And I can get away with this a little bit because we have a tutoring center and we can have some of those tutors actually give out reassessments and kind of proctor them. And so so what I do is like in between exams is I have retesting weeks, and students can retest any concept on any previous exam once during that week. And they can split it up. So if they have 15 minutes and they want to try to reassess concept 1 on Monday, they can. And they can stop in on Tuesday and try concepts 3 and 7. Okay. They couldn't come back on Wednesday and try to do concept 1 again because they already did it that week. But this I found to be really helpful. It allows students to kind of take their time and kind of split things up. It requires you to have either like, and you can do this just in your office hours. If you have a lot of office hours or accessible office hours, the reason why I like to use the tutoring center is because they're open for many hours. So students can fit it into their classes. And so I found this to be a really nice way. And if I were doing an 18-day class, that's what I would do. I would actually kind of say like, even maybe midweek, like after Wednesday, you can retest any of these concepts throughout the week. That would be one of my ideas, and which I actually say down here. Another way you could do is if you have like, I know that we have these kind of linear algebra, we have night classes that are meet once a week for 3 hours. And like a way to do it could be like just the last like half hour of the 3-hour class is like you can reassess, you can do a quiz and reassess that week. One thing I do recommend though is limit the number of attempts. I had one friend who did this and they just said, anytime you want to reattempt anything, just let me know and come to my office and you can do it anytime. And what he found was that like everyone was just kind of like mimicking or trying to like just kind of like, here, if I don't put any effort in, like, can I just reassess? And it became a big headache for him, and the students weren't really doing well at it either. So I feel like having some type of limit, which is why I only require them to be able to do it once during that week. So that was just a little comment. These are some of the common things for reassessment, but you can also be creative and like think about what works for your classroom. Organization. So one of the big things is, okay, so you're going to let them reassess. And so you need to think about how are you going to organize those problems and write those problems. So we'll talk about like, so first of all, you want to think about the concepts in your class, and then you want to pick somewhat rich questions that actually assess that won't fall into just mimicking the answer, right? Like where they can just like like on WebAssign, I remember they could just kind of like follow the pattern and they don't know what they're actually doing. So one of the ways to do this is when you have a concept question is to try to think of like multiple versions of that question, and then try to like keep a nice folder of that. It's always nice to do it before the semester starts, but I've never done that because I never am that much ahead of myself. So I am usually kind of doing it within the moment or after the semester. You also want to think about how you're going to like tell students about the grades, and I didn't add it to this. Well, they're at the back of this presentation. So if you download these slides from the Padlet, you can look at it. Different examples of how to put the grades in Excel or your learning management thing. So I kind of mentioned this. So writing learning objectives. So first of all, you want to try to think about what are some of the major things in your course. Can you kind of divide it into sections? And you want to think about what skills or concepts you want students to like comprehend and be able to demonstrate for each of those. So those can be, so here's an example learning concept. One is like, this is from someone's class on derivative techniques. And they have they want you to be able to apply the power rule, quotient rule, chain rule, and decide which method is appropriate. Now, it may be hard to come up with just one question that can answer everything. So sometimes you'll have problems that have multiple parts. Sometimes you can pick a really rich problem. So for example, when I do hydrostatic force, I can pick a really good problem and like I can just change, I basically use the shape that's going above and below the water, and you can change the shape and you can change if it's up or down, and that's enough to kind of give you some good variety for things. So for derivative techniques, here's an example sample problem that someone has used. So note that they have 3 parts, and it has like chain rules and quotient rules and product rules and kind of this whole gamut of things for derivative techniques. So one of the questions is like, how many different versions of a problem? It kind of depends on how many reassessment opportunities and how much different versions you want to have to be able to make. Some are like that last one we did. It's pretty easy to change numbers, symbols, and functions and move them around. For larger problems, I mentioned like the hydrostatic force, you can like change the shape that's being and that you're looking at, and also moving up and down the water. Another really great thing for mastery grading are freeform problems. So, for example, generate a blank that has this property. Come up with a parametric line that is perpendicular to this line. This could be really hard to grade with points system, but it's much easier with a mastery type grading. So those are some ideas for that. Okay, common challenges. Okay, so it is a larger volume of grading. So like you will get a lot more things that you have to grade, but it's at least in my mind easier grading. on a 2 or 3 point scale. There's a lot more upfront workload for the instructor, at least to think about how many concepts and which concepts you're going to have. And writing rich questions takes some work and time, and I've changed mine. Like, you know, I'm learning from my own mistakes too. So I've changed some of my concepts. And one of the great things is that one of the resources that I have for you is this really great repository of a bunch of other people's like grading for growth syllabi and objectives. And it's nice to be able to look at what other people have done and look at sample problems. And I have all of my sample problems from all of my classes that I've done on the Padlet too. And I'm happy to share, and I'm happy to share all my versions too, so that like you can like look at those too. Some will find that there's a slightly bimodal distribution of grades. Now, I have noticed this for one, and this is why I think there's a bimodal distribution. Okay, so on one hand, I am a pity grader. Like when I do points, it's just like they wrote something down, so shouldn't they get like 3 points? So I feel like you can have students who speak enough to get a D in some classes using standard grading, but they don't really know anything. And I feel like those students will get an F when they don't master anything. And so, and I feel like that's a really good indicator that they're not ready to go on to the next class, or, you know, like, so I don't mind that. There's also way more A's in my classes because I think this benefits the hardworking B student. And I will always want like a grading thing that like benefits hardworking. So I have no problem giving more A's because I feel like you get that hardworking B student who just works on it until they master enough concepts to get an A. So that's my anecdotal like reasoning for why I think it can be bimodal. And I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I think some students will always most students of mine love this type of grading and they ask for it when I don't have a class that has it. But some students still prefer, you know, partial credit. I think kind of a lazy A student who thinks that if they can just be above the curve, I feel like sometimes they get C's in this sometimes. I'm always worried about memorizing. Like, are they just mimicking? And so I feel like that goes into trying to write rich questions. And I'm really harsh if I feel like if they're setting up the hydrostatic force question and they're just thinking, well, usually there's a 0 to something like, so I'm actually pretty picky about things that I'm like, they haven't shown me that they mastered this. The other thing is students master concepts slower than you expect. And so what I do is if a student hasn't mastered anything on exam 1, I always try to talk to them in my class or like bring them into my office and talk to them about like strategies for studying and ask them about how they studied for the exam. And I feel like that can help. And also just encourage students that this is normal and that this is just how we become better at something is through practice. I really love coming into my classes because people are like, hey, I mastered this. Like, did you do, it's not a like, I got a 97. Did you get a 92? Like, I feel like it's a much more like I just like the language better. Some challenges. So even if you have a really great like grading for growth like exam, potential pitfalls are these, and these are the what make you kind of like I don't have like a one fix for everything for these, but like okay, when you use a multi-part problem, what if they've done the first 2 perfect but then they clearly don't understand the third part? Is that a mastery or not? You know, I have one of my concepts is knowing definitions in real analysis. What if I have 6 definitions and they do 5 perfectly and they leave 1 blank? What about this one I see all the time when my linear algebra, I can't quite tell if they really understand if they're showing linear independence or they're just saying like 0 equals 0 equals 0 is the only solution. So like, you know, have they really proved that that's the case? Have they really proved the spanning part? A student fails to provide some key component that wasn't explicitly stated, but assumed necessary for mastery. So like, these are all things. And again, I go back to what Austin said, like, would this student benefit from looking at this again? I think is a good way to deal with these. And often if I have something like this that's borderline and it's their last chance, like this is the last chance of the semester if they have no other chances. So I might master them depending on what the exam is. And I feel like this is where you get that kind of like question that I can't answer. Like these are harder, the hard problems that come up with mastery grading. So other challenges, sometimes you need to justify the switch. And I would recommend using some of the like Primus Mastery Grading Special Edition. I also have a bunch of literature that I have on the Padlet too. And you could talk, I'm happy to talk with you or help in any way. Another thing is to ensure student buy-in. So like, I used to not really talk about the syllabus at all, but I do now because we use this alternate assessment and I want them to be aware of it. And then I want to remind them. Jessica Kelly has a really great article in the Primus Special Edition that is all about ensuring student buy-in. Which I would highly recommend. So I feel like one of the things that I try to do is just keep encouraging students and working with them, like encourage them to come to your office, work on different concepts. They really want to dig into why did I not master this? Like, and I feel like it helps with like better office interactions with my students. So here's a nice little checklist that we've put together when you're planning. If you're like, I'm going to take the jump, I'm going to try to do this grading for growth. One of the first things to do is to split your course into a certain number of concepts. Some people do even more than like this is not like you shouldn't have more than 24. Maybe you have a class that needs like 36. Like it's kind of up to you. List the student learning objectives for each concept of what you're looking for in these concepts. Think about, do I want things that are not tied to this like that, like classroom culture or participation or portfolio, and how you want to incorporate that. Decide on a reassessment plan. Like, do I want to do in-class quizzes? Do I want to do retesting weeks? Do I want it to, be outside? Think about how to encourage your student buy-in throughout the semester. Kind of have like if people don't master, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to do this. Think about the language in your syllabus. There's a lot of great examples on the repository for that. Of course, you want to ask or kind of come up with all the different questions. And the other thing I want you to be aware of is that you can make adjustments. I've had a linear algebra class where I was just like, we need to put in an extra retesting week because you guys need it. And that's fine. Like, I feel like as long as you do something, change something so it's in the student benefit, you can also adjust the number of concepts and the content sometimes if needed. Like I remember a lot of people did this in 2020, when we all moved online and suddenly people lost like weeks of classes, like they had to make an adjustment, and that's okay. I feel like as long as you're upfront with the students, I think and fair with the students, I think it's good. And reach out and ask for help with other people. I love the fact that I'm able to do this with several different people, so I can ask for help on that. And so there's a lot of different resources. I think I can put it back on I still have it saved. The Padlet, I think I have it where you have to like ask for permission, just because there's other people's content on there. There's the Grading for Growth conference is a really great conference that has a lot of really awesome people who are involved with it. There's also, I think, Robert Talbert and David Clark have a new blog or little blog post, which I should have put on here, but I'll add it to the Padlet, which they have really great thoughts about stuff. And you can definitely email me and ask me anything. I love talking about this. I love sharing stuff. And there's a lot more that you can do with these things, like with regards to specs and standards. And you can kind of like, there's a lot of different variations for these things. I feel like the method I kind of described here is a really good gateway to alternate assessments and ungrading and things like that. I remembered one other thing. So one other thing, that for those tough questions, like a student hasn't shown this one thing, what some professors do is they'll have that student come to their office or schedule a Zoom meeting with them where you just ask them to kind of explain something a little bit better. And sometimes that's enough for them to kind of like master it. Like, like they like, can you explain this better or something? And that can, so I know there's been people who have done that. I haven't done that, but I know that that's a way to do that. Oh, thank you, Jenny. So That is all I have for you. And I went really, really fast. So I'm really sorry. Usually I have multiple hours to like kind of discuss this and let you guys ask more questions and talk with each other. So in my mind, I was like, this really isn't a workshop. It was more of an advertisement, I guess. So questions. So Becky.
So I've been like learning a little bit here and there over this about mastery grading over the last year, and the thing that I'm struggling with is I coordinate 18 sections of Calculus 2 with about 680 students taking it. How do you scale this in a way that like
there are actual articles in the Primus Special Edition. I think
awesome.
That is actually about scaling and doing it at scale. I'm trying to remember. Sharonda, I think one of the main organizers for the Grading for Growth, has done this a lot. I can get you her contact information.
Okay. Awesome.
So yeah, and I think even like Michigan State moved to like kind of like coordinated and did like kind of a way of coordinating this. Like we have multiple sections of linear algebra and we coordinate it this way, like with different professors, but I'm also at a much smaller school. So it's easier. Like there's like 4 teachers that I'm talking with, and we're all like sharing the load of, I'll write 3 versions of this one, you write 3 versions of that one. So yeah, so I think there's definitely ways to do this and scale it. Did I answer your question somewhat? I basically was like, there are better people to answer that question, and I can share with you those people's names. Mandy?
I have maybe 2 main questions. One is, so in real analysis, when you do your definitions, is it like each like being able to write down this definition is one objective, like one of your 18, or is it like you have to?
No. So here's how I do my real analysis. Okay, so I have the mastery portion, and then I have an oral exam that has like really hard questions that they then have to present to me because like, you know, they need more guidance, or like I feel like that's better than a take-home exam. But for the mastery exams, so I have 3 exams, and each exam has like definitions from this unit. And so I have like between like 6 and 12 definitions that they should know. 12 might be a little much. And I usually take a subset of them and put them on there. And so that's one concept. And then another concept is basic examples, counterexamples, and theorems. So I ask a bunch of like true and false, and like just kind of like, do you understand how to apply these problems? So there's usually like probably 10 to 12 questions of those. And then I'll have like one that's like, use the delta epsilon definition to prove that, like, then I have like kind of like standard proofs of like, these are standard proofs in real analysis. They're not really like, you know, they're not as challenging as the like oral exam ones, but they're like standard ones that you should be able to do. Can you use induction to prove this property for like this sequence? So that's how I break them up pretty much. I'm happy to share like some of those examples. And Jessica O'Shaughnessy is the one who's done abstract algebra from our next group. So you could ask her to see what she does. But I often, if they miss one of those like 8 definitions, I usually master them. So that was one of the things, like they have 6. If there's only 6 definitions and they miss one, that's a little harder. But like if you have like 10 and they miss one, or they like kind of are off ever so slightly on one of them, like I usually master that. I give them one miss.
Okay. My other question is, how do you factor homework into all of this, or is it just kind
of? So some people do mastery grading for homework as well, and like they do their whole, like they do this type of assessment for everything, or they don't even count those things and they just have the mastery grade for their like exam. That's a little intense for me, just because I don't want to be reassessing and regrading homework. I do use Newton Alta for the online homework because I feel like it's mastery based. So I do have that. I basically have my exams worth like 65% of the grade, or however much I think. And then I have homework is worth like between like 10 and 20, depending on like what other things are going on in my class. And I grade those normally with points, just because I for myself, I would have a hard time. But it always makes me wish I could grade things on a mastery on the homework, because I'm like, they made this harebrained thing and I don't like, how many points do I take off for this? Because it's not on what I was expecting on my rubric. So that's how I basically what I would normally use for a standard exams, I just use for a mastery grade.
Okay, so your homework is just still was like
Mhm.
normal-ish, and it's just some percentage of the grade, and then the mastery stuff is another percentage.
Right, right. But some people do it for all of them. I just personally don't. Other questions or anything? Yeah, Molly.
So I guess in thinking about real analysis, one thing that I think I would struggle with is trying to come up with a bank of questions that are of similar difficulty. There's only so many like limits that you could do with an epsilon delta proof, right? So like how do you deal with kind of that side of things and coming up with that bank?
I haven't had a big problem with that because I feel like a lot, like I have, let's see, it's a little bit harder. Okay, here's a good example. Linear algebra, one of the last concepts is Gram-Schmidt. I know you're asking about real analysis, but I feel like this is like the I basically make them do like a third step of a Gram-Schmidt problem. And like those can become super messy, right? And awful to grade. So I only have a few of those, but they're also near the end, so it's not as bad. So sometimes I just don't have as many. And the same thing with like real analysis. I have like a concept where I'm wanting them to use induction, and I want them to kind of understand the properties of sequences. So they have to use induction to prove like this sequence is bounded or this sequence is something. And I usually only have like one version. I only have like 5 versions, and it's for each of the like retesting. And I haven't had much of a problem with that because I like change them up each year, and my real analysis class is pretty small. For limits and for like delta epsilon proofs, I find those to be easy to write. And I just, sometimes I have made a mistake and I have said, prove that this limit goes to this, and I copy pasted wrong and it doesn't actually go to that limit. And that's more where I have problems in real analysis, where they're like, this actually doesn't go to here, Dr. Harsy. I'm like, oh, you're right. How do I assess this now? But again, I feel like what I use for the proofs that I use for my mastery exams in real analysis are a lot more like kind of standard proofs. And the harder ones, if you get into integration, which I actually don't have them tested on integration, they end at differentiation in my real analysis class. But I used to have them go to there, and those were a little harder to come up with multiple examples. But you'd be surprised, like changing things a little bit, they can't mimic it. As well, like you'd be surprised, like you think it's like in your mind you're like, this is the same problem, but for them it's not. I'm always kind of shocked by that. But I do, that's why I also have the oral exams for like harder, deeper questions, and I use the homework grades to ask harder questions than what's on the exams.
Thank you.
Other questions or anything I can bother on about? I can show you so here are some example grade books, and like just to kind of see what they look like in like Blackboard. And like you can go into even more, like there's like exemplary, like, progressing. You can add more tiers to things. And you can add even more, like this can become more. I feel like this is a very simple way, but you can make it a lot more complex to suit your needs. So this is Canvas. Here's an Excel sheet. It's another Excel sheet. I can't remember what the P star meant. Maybe it was like if it that it might be a mastery if they don't finish it, or it's one that they want to look back at. I'm not 100% sure. I also have stuff that like, if you're doing it remote, I find it to be really hard because I was on like Chegg, like I just feel like people were trying to cheat a lot more. And I feel like the stakes are a lot higher for mastery, like when you're remote online. And so that's a little bit hard.
I have a quick question if we have time.
Yes, and I see another.
The first time.
Sorry.
When you decided to do this for the first course, the first time, how hard was it, and what would be your advice? When
Okay.
Plus, it's easiest.
I did real analysis right off the bat. And I had never taught real analysis before. So that was my problem, was more that I hadn't taught real analysis before. So I would recommend doing a course that you've taught before, and you kind of know what you're going to get to, and you know what are good questions for that. So that's when I took Calc 2 and I changed it to mastery, that was easier than starting with real analysis, because I basically was very vague with my students. I was like, I think there will be 16 concepts. I don't know what they are, but I will tell you before the exam. And I didn't do any retesting, so they all had their reassessment only on exams. And they were mature enough and good enough to do it, and they were very nice to me. It was my first semester teaching. It was
Thank you, Amanda.
yeah, but I would recommend the course that you've taught before. Yeah, Jenny.
Just a quick question. Who's responsible for keeping track of which goals the student has passed?
I keep track of them, but I also let them have a sheet of paper. Some people can't remember, and I let them use a sheet of paper. I'm going to work on these ones, or I'm going to look for these ones. I also am very, very clear. I try very hard to update everything on Blackboard right away, because it's easy to make a mistake. And I tell them, save your exams, save anything you've done, so that you can say, actually, I did master this. Here it is, because it's very easy to miss that. Chris, remind, what does the EMRN scale mean?
Oh, that's exceeds expectations, meets expectations,
Yes.
reassess, not.
Yeah. So I know people have used that for, yes. For you need to have a certain number of E's and M's and R's and N's, and they have a table where they're if you have this many of this and this many of this is your grade. I've done that in real analysis once. But I instead have some floors of you have to at least do this to earn an A. That's what I changed mine to. Yeah, Becky.
So I'm just trying to think of the logistics. Are you manually entering these things into the grade book, or is there like right now, I have a grader who grades a homework assignment, and they assign points to the problems, and that gets imported into my grade book, and I don't have to do anything. And for exams, we scan them all, put them into Gradescope, and I grade them on Gradescope, and I import them in. I don't do any entering right now. Is there a way for this to be automated, or is this at all? I'm also thinking of 686 students.
Yeah, my guess is you probably could write a program that would make it easier to do that. I deal with classes of 20 to 30, and I do it by hand. That's a good question.
I guess I could see entering the grade, because Gradescope would give me I could give a numeric score to mean these things. I could easily tell Excel to turn a 5 into an M, right?
Yeah, I've done that before too.
Okay.
In fact, I that's what I played around with when I first started doing these. I actually used 100, 75, and 0, or for my 3 tiers. And then I realized that I could just change it to let it allow me to do any text. So then I could do M. I use Journeyman. I'm trying to get away from it. That's my middle. I like progressing better. And Novice. So, and it sounds from what Chris said that it's working on something. I know there's a lot. I know there's a call for this, and I know from Twitter that there's been more and more emphasis on trying to get these learning management systems to be able to do different things. But I don't.
Canvas has the ability to do a mastery grade book for your grade book.
Yeah, I think that was I'm trying to think which was the one. I think you can do checks.
Like the Canvas one.
Yeah, this is the Canvas one. I don't have Canvas. I have Blackboard, which is fine. So this is what mine look more like. So, and I usually show it to the students. This is showing that it's not showing to the students, but I show it to the students. And I also kind of have a column that says this is your current exam grade right now. And usually I don't incorporate their exam score until 3/4 of the way through the semester, or 2/3 of the way through the semester. And then I tell them your grade's going to drop because there aren't enough concepts for you to master. So but I just want you to know exactly where you stand. And then I tell them this is how many, they can email me and I can say, this is how many concepts you need to master to get X grade. So any other questions or anything? I think we're at the hour, but I can talk more at the panel, which is in 15 minutes, right?
Cool. Yeah. Thank you again to Amanda. And for those of you in the section next, so Amanda, Molly, me, Becky will be on the panel. It'll just be kind of a informal while we eat our lunch. We'll kind of chat about stuff. You can ask us whatever. So we'll meet back. That's
Good to
on
see
one of
you
our
again,
separate
Tracy.
Zoom links, right, Becky? Or is that one of our, that's a separate Zoom link, right? For the panel? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I would just try putting it in the chat, but I realized that I was not chatting to everybody. There. Okay. That's the one for lunch. Yeah, we'll see y'all in 15 minutes.
Okay, thanks everyone. If I
Cool.
don't see you in
Thanks
a
a lot,
little
Amanda.
bit,
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was
feel
great.
free to contact me if you have any specific questions. I can do my best to answer or tell you someone else who is better at answering.